Okay, let's add an activity to our form. This is the activity from the navigator on the left hand side. It's one field currently, it's the activity type. Until we configure an activity type for the fields to report to in Donorfy, we can't configure anything else about the activity. So this is the first step in setting that up. The activity type is a hidden field. So again, whilst this reads visible label and visible sublabel, these won't actually be rendering on the front end of the site, any site that you embed this form on, I should say. This is just for the admin's clarity that this question represents. This field, it's not a question at all, is it? It's an activity type is the label I'm going to give that. Therefore, it's clear to me what this field is in this editor. But here, this does matter. The activity type value, now this has to match verbatim with an activity type you've set up in Donorfy. So imagine you have set one up called touchpoint, and you're using this to capture some rich comms for reflection on your marketing and this kind of thing. This might be why you would set up this activity type. It's always required, but then again, it's a hidden field, so it's always going to pass a value. We'll add that in. It's different from the other fields in our editor. As you can see, it's got a crossed out eyeball icon. It's a grayish purplish tint. Those are indicative of it being in your form, but not rendering on the front end. It is hidden. But adding an activity type brings us over to the navigator. Now you can see we've got the full gamut of activity orientated fields at our disposal. I'm not going to walk through each and every one of them. There is 40, I believe, 41 actually with the notes as well, but we'll move through a couple of them. We'll stick a code 1 in. Code 1, codes 1 through 10, code being Donorfy parlance for input, just a straightforward text input into the activity. Let's look at one of these. So this will render, so the visible label is important now. How did you hear about us? Question mark might be the question you're posing to grab a code 1 value. I won't put a sublabel in, it's not mandatory, but the field here could be made mandatory. By ticking required here, the user must supply an answer to this question. I'll leave that unchecked for the time being. Render mode is important. So currently the render mode is hidden by default. So how did you hear about us? I could set that to Facebook, for example, and then absolutely everybody who submits this form will be recorded as having arrived here, or sorry, as having heard about the organization via Facebook. Now that obviously won't be true, unless, for example, how did you hear about us, or becomes how did you hear about this campaign or this page or whatever, and that your traffic coming to here has come from a Facebook ad or come from a Facebook post with a link and so on. So you can guarantee that this is where they've come from. So this could be plausibly a default value, and the field therefore is hidden. But in this context, that doesn't quite make sense. A text input field doesn't have any further configuration. This means that to your end user, how did you hear about us will be presented to them with an open field, and they can type anything they want. That's going to make things tough for your reporting and your listing, because you can't guarantee what's going to be in those answers supplied. The hidden input with the default value, of course, you can guarantee 100% of the time that's going to be Facebook, so you can use that as part of your filtering on your lists in Donorfy. Equally, that's true of a select drop down or radio buttons. The only difference between those is the final rendering on the end form to your end user. The configurations are identical. So how did you hear about us? Option 1 in my drop down would be Facebook. We'll add another choice there. You might have heard about us via our newsletter. You presumably would have already heard about them to be subscribed. I'm sort of making this up on the fly here. TV ad, there you go, that's a more credible choice. Those are my choices. If I select radio buttons as the output, the choices are retained. We'll keep with the select drop down for the time being. And then that's done. So that now is in my form. That's a question my user will hit. They won't see the activity type, remember, they will see this first question here. Skipping past all the codes, we're on to the yes, no's. This presents as a single checkbox to the user, where checking it is a yes, not checking it is a no. The question here might well be, would you consider telling a friend? Question mark. That's the visible label that's going to head the field. The actual checkbox is going to have a label, it's going to have some text, and this is where you would set that. Yes, I will tell my friends. It's a yes/no situation. Making it required is quite forceful, quite heavy-handed, but again, it really depends on the context you're setting with this question up here. There may be a case where you do need a checkbox, so it's more of a requirement on the checkbox, so it's more like I accept to the terms and conditions, that kind of thing. So we'll stick one of those in as well. We'll drop a date field in. How about this? When did you hear about us? Just to stick with the theme. Nothing further to configure about that. That is quite simply going to present a date style calendar modal field, and your user either has to or optionally supplies the answer to that question. And we've got number fields as well. They are going to just take a numeral as opposed to any alpha characters. I'm really scraping the barrel on this. How many times have you heard about us? Naturally, you've all got much better context for using these fields. Done. Right. Oh, I nearly saved changes and previewed, but there's one more lurking around in the block. The activity notes field. Here we go. Now I've dropped an activity notes field into here. I'm not going to get clever with this one. We're just going to head that with tell us more. Here's an interesting note. You can add many activity fields, and each one of their values will be concatenated into a single note. So an activity in Donorfy, in this case the touch point activity type, will have a single notes field. You're free though to put as many activity notes fields in at different points throughout your form, and therefore the context throughout the language of the form might shift and change, and the questions you're asking may require lengthier answers. And so the activity notes is good for that, but it's going to concatenate all the answers into a single string, into a single note, and then deploy that to the one notes field available in the activity. Okay, but that's enough configuration. Let's take a look in a preview of what the end user is going to encounter here. So how did you hear about us? Well, Facebook, no. TV, newsletter, I heard from the newsletter. Yes, I will tell my friends. How many, when did you hear about us? Last Wednesday, whatever that was. How many times did you hear about us? It was three times explicitly. Tell us more. Lovely stuff. There you go. All of those fields now will write to that single activity. The activity type is buried in the form. It's not presented here to me. There you go. That's how you get activities through.